Well, hi, everybody. Dave Lundahl. I'm the CEO for Insights Now. Here, really exciting session today for those of you that are able to join. And then we're going to be doing a lot of question and answer, try to have a lot of good sort of exchange back and forth for those of you that are able to join us. And then for those that are listening in a recording, I welcome you as well. So the topic for today is a quest for strategic insights, future directions from past lessons. And the reason why we chose this is that today, this month is, or last month, I should say, was Insights Now's 20th anniversary. And so it brought back a flood of memories, but it also has us really looking to the future. So I like to introduce a few other people that we have here today. Greg Stuckey, our Chief Research Officer at Insights Now. Greg and I have been working together for 27 years. That's a story in itself. Hard to believe. And Simon Chadwick. Simon is a global leader in the insights industry. He has been working with Insights Now for, I think, 11 years now as one of our board members. So Simon, welcome. I'm glad to have you here as well. So I'd like to kick things up with a little bit of housekeeping. So all of you can note at the bottom of your screen, it says Q&A. So click on that at any point if you want to post a question as it comes to you. And we're going to have a couple prompts throughout this asking for you to consider some questions and things like that as we go through. And then we'll address them at the end because I think it's important that we get your thoughts as well to the really important subject of future directions for the insights industry. Okay, well, so with that, I like to kind of start things off with a story. And this is, Greg and I, when we started working in the insights industry, we were known as people that are really good in product research and sensory research. We had great skills in terms of our background, fairly well known, especially in the food industry. And so with that expertise, though, in the year that we started Insights Now, this is 2003, we had some piece of research that changed everything. So I'm going to let Greg start with that because
Sure.
it's 20 years ago.
Yeah,
but it was
absolutely.
really an impactful piece of research for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when we were kicking off, one of the things that we were working on was a project with Takasago at the time, and we subsequently presented a lot of this work through the ESMR group as well, and through some of those sessions. So if you're really interested, you can go see those publications if you want to get into it. But what we were working on was an understanding of fragrances and a better understanding of what kinds of fragrances should we be able to use in different scenarios, because one of the things we knew is that it wasn't important just for people to like a fragrance, right? There was a lot of liked fragrances out there, but we wanted to make sure that we were putting pieces together right. And so as we were working on fragrance perceptions for fabric softeners, we came across some reasonably unexpected results. We were asking people to describe the fragrances because we wanted to get the sensory characteristics out. And what we found is people really had a very difficult time describing the sensory. Now, us coming from the sensory background, we're like, well, that's kind of weird. I mean, it's pretty easy for us to do because obviously that's our field. But why is this so hard for other people? And then all of a sudden we went, wait, why is it so easy for them to tell the stories of how it makes them feel? And they instantly just, bam, oh, it makes me feel like this. Bam, this is the memory it's bringing up. And that shift, it's really, really hard to tell the story of what it smells like. I don't have words to describe it, but I can tell you how it makes me feel. That was really a really unexpected result. The speed at which they associated feelings and memories was so unexpected. We were like, okay, we got to figure out not just the psychology, we got to figure out why this is happening and how we can capitalize on that.
Yeah. And little did we know at that time, it was probably one of the most pivotal moments, certainly of my career. And I'm not going to speak for Greg, but it was certainly it sent us on a quest, and that quest is really what changed everything. It took 8 years for us to answer the question of why these results. And so what we
Right.
did is we delved into the world of behavioral science, because I was really intrigued about how and learned about how emotions are generated, how they're felt, um, how emotions motivate people, what's the link between emotions and the formation of memories that motivate
Yep.
future behaviors. I mean, so important if you're in a marketing research, if you're in a product research, to have these understanding is foundational. So and what from doing all this research, and amassing a lot of knowledge from that, I was able to publish a book called Breakthrough Food Product Innovation Through Emotions Research. And that was released in 2011, 8 years later. Now, that still didn't answer the question, though,
Not really.
because the same year, another book came out. And this book was actually a bestseller, unlike mine. But Daniel
Hey,
Kahneman published
that's
a
right.
bestseller called Thinking Fast and Slow. And Kahneman's ideas about thinking fast and slow really unlocked the memory of why the fabric softeners. Okay. If you all have some thoughts on this, on why, put them in the chat right now. I mean, I welcome you, and we'll talk about that later. But in thinking fast and slow, the consumers, the participants that were in this study, were using their fast brains when they're able to rapidly be able to associate things to how it made them feel or recall memories, because that is part of this sort of implicit brain, the fast part of our brain. But when we ask people to describe the fragrances, which is a difficult task, it forced
Mm,
them into using their slow thinking brain, the
right.
rational part of the brain. It takes perfumists years and years of training to be able to describe fragrances. Not an easy thing to do. So anyways, that's the answer. It took us 8 years, but it changed everything in terms of our understanding of consumer behavior and how to apply it.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of part of the answer, really, right? It sounds simple, but it's a piece of the answer, because like Kahneman's piece and thinking fast, thinking slow, another really key element that came out of that exploration was the realization that the implicit connections are built in a moment in a person's life. So without context, without that
Mhm.
moment as the foundation, then basically you're not able to build very well. So that changed how we started doing research. So we stopped looking at segments of people as groups of individuals, rather started focusing on them as groups of moments. What's the moment I'm going to focus on building a product to work within? What's that context it has to work within? And once we started shifting from focusing on groups of people that should be, liking our product, using our product, to building towards moments where the product mattered, and and making sure that the product's relevant to a person in a specific moment in their life. That's when things shifted from, hey, we have some success with good products and we're good at making good products, to, oh my goodness, now we can create bestsellers all the time and on a consistent basis.
Right, right. Now, I'm going to shift gears here to start thinking about the future. Now,
Right.
Simon, we didn't do a full introduction with you, so I'm going to let you to introduce yourself, because you're doing some amazing things. You've been doing a lot of things in leadership throughout the world in terms of the insights industry. Can you give us a little background to yourself, and then we'll start weaving in you into the conversation.
Surely. Thanks, Dave. So very, very rapid potted history. I was trained in market research 40 something years ago. in Research International, and I gradually worked around a number of different offices there, a number of different experiences into leadership positions, and was CEO of a number of Research International companies in Italy and the UK and the US, a number of WPP companies also in different countries, and ended my career as a corporate CEO, if you like, as global CEO of a company called NOP World, which was bought by GfK. And at that point, I realized that there was a lot of change going on in the industry. I and a colleague at about the same time as you were starting Insights Now, and that we felt that there was a niche for a change management consulting company that could help people such as yourselves navigate this change. It's been an amazing 20 years because we have been able to see the sorts of change you've been talking about, the sorts of thinking change that has gone on. And we have been able to conduct studies within the industry. We've been able to conduct studies amongst clients. Where are they going? What do they need? What are their needs? What are their moments, to be frank? It's not that there are segments of clients. There are clients in a moment that need something. Yeah. So that is that, and being involved in the industry as a whole. I helped found the Insights Association was its inaugural chair.
Yeah.
I'm editor of a magazine for SMR as well. So that's the short version.
Yeah, well, it's really impressive. So Simon, you've heard this genesis story of how we came to really create some of our beliefs and evolve, as the industry, as we all became learning. I mean, today everybody knows about Kahnemans. A lot of researchers have fully embraced behavioral science, or as at least some of the methods that have evolved from that. Is it still a differentiator? Not everybody has fully embraced it as we have, but where do you see the future of insights from this sort of gestalt of understanding, consumers behaviorally and emotionally, as well as, but with everything that's going on today, what is going on in the industry from your perspective?
Well, I think the whole thinking fast, thinking slow revolution, the behavioral science revolution within social psychology, within sociology, and in the research world, gradually has become accepted. There is even now some resistance to it, let's put it that way. But nonetheless, I think it's majorly accepted. What's interesting about it is that it permeated a lot of different types of research. So it wasn't only product research, but it was research into ad testing. It even got into things like facial recognition and eye tracking and all of those sorts of things. And we saw a period there of change in research thinking. Over the last 10 years, we've moved from that to an emphasis on research technology. And the amazing thing is here, research didn't attract a lot of inward investment in the past. You didn't see venture capitalists kind of riding in and saying, yes, this is where we want to be in research. But in 2011, that started to change. And we've been tracking that change ever since. And since that time, $45 billion has come into this industry from venture capital and from private equity. And 75% of this industry is now owned by venture capital and private equity. Now, why is this actually important here? Because now all the innovation has been about doing things technologically, doing them faster, doing them in an automated fashion. There have been some really good things about it, like, you know, we're starting to get our arms around masses of data and being able to process those data really fast. But at the same time, that's kind of created a do-it-yourself side to the industry. But at the client side, particularly because of the pandemic, have also been looking at how do we innovate? How do we look forward? How do we get to foresight from insight? And I think, you know, time will tell that the pandemic was an amazing time for client researchers because they got to the center of decision making. And so they're now, you know, they're now that much more important than they were. Now we come to the advent of generative AI. And everybody's panicking. Oh my Lord, you know, it's going to take my job. But the genesis of your Genesis story actually points in a different direction. Because what AI will do is take facts, you know, tons of facts, and put them together and look at the way in which they connect and come out with patterns and write, you know, reports, probably as boringly as we have in the past. But what it can't do is it can't get to those emotional moments necessarily.
Right.
It can't get to what is behind human decision making in terms of emotion. That still is going to take human intelligence, human empathy. And that's why I think it's so exciting that, you know, you guys are leaders in this field in an age when actually we're going to be able to do much more.
Yeah, well, I'm excited about the AI. I think that's it's interesting, like you said, that one of the things it does really well is it organizes things really well. So it's I don't know if it's taking people's jobs, but it's gonna take people are gonna have to shift some of their skill sets for sure, right? So like I just think of the really obvious ones like confirmation bias. What is AI really good at doing? It's really good at telling you the story you want to hear. So being able to identify confirmation bias, I mean, you might not call it that, you know, as a non-researcher, but that's going to be a really important skill as an example.
And this confirmation
This
bias.
confirmation, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. It can go both
Right.
ways.
Go both ways for sure.
But yeah, I mean, you know, generative AI has been shown in important cases to downright lie.
Yeah.
In service of confirmation bias. But I think the other thing there, Greg, is what really, really, really good researchers are brilliant at is looking at data and look, yeah, there's all the patterns and everything connecting the dots. But then they spot that piece of data that is out of place. It shouldn't be there. What does it mean? And I don't think AI yet is going to be able necessarily to spot that. I'm sure someone will train it to eventually. But it is that type of thing that leads to real insight. So there is another client of mine, actually, they have a very famous story where they were doing work on a brand of hummus. And it was basically being hammered in the marketplace. And it was lost in pretty much everything except that the one piece of data that was out of place was its likings rating was exactly the same as all its competitors. Its likings rating. So they dug further and they found that that was driven by millennials. So then they said, well, let's go and find out everything we can about what's important to millennials. what are the moments millennials get together, and what are the moments in which a hummus is important to, a gathering or whatever. And they built this whole picture, and they built a movie out of it. The product was repositioned basically, and it became number one. That was because that piece of data was out of place. And I don't think we're there yet with machines.
Yeah,
that
certainly not.
that leads me to really think about the strategic value of insights. This is a great story, Simon. Where the one piece of data, just like the one piece of data that we had, people couldn't describe what's going on. So the idea of this, having these insights, these aha moments from research, and that, how do you build that? How do you utilize this for becoming more strategic, to raise the bar in terms of, if you're a corporate function, insights function, right? If you're a corporate insights function, to get a seat at the table at decision making, requires this, right?
It does. And that's why I also use the word foresight beforehand, because that is what being strategic is. It's about enabling your company, your organization, to gain competitive advantage. The last time the sort of insights ecosystem, the corporate insights ecosystem, was measured, only about 5% of corporate insights functions were felt to deliver competitive advantage. I think it's more today. I think it is a lot more since the pandemic. We shall find out. But the idea there. So I have an old colleague of mine who was at General Mills, and I asked him back in the day, why does General Mills keep on inventing or buying research companies? And he said, because if I have an issue or a problem, and I go to one of the big research companies, they will pull down a solution off the shelf, and I know that my competition will have the same problem, and they'll go to the same companies and they'll pull down the same solution from the shelf. Nobody, and certainly not me, has competitive advantage. So it has to lie in competitive advantage. I think the issue right now is, and this is particularly, you can tell me whether I'm wrong or not, but I think it's particularly true of product research, is that so many companies are so siloed that they don't use insights to the biggest strategic advantage. So product doesn't necessarily talk to marketing, or if they do, they're not necessarily singing out of the same hymn book. And until we can get insights as sort of more of a flow through an organization rather than just a set of projects, it's going to be difficult to break through that next barrier. Maybe that's where technology today will help us.
Yeah, I that alignment between the brand and the product and the brand message, especially with the companies using agencies to build out the advertisement stories, et cetera, so forth. There's so many times where we've talked about, had projects where, you've got a fantastic internal communication, but then they send it off to a creative agency because they want the creativity to, capture or disrupt people at the moment. But the problem is if they take it out of context, it all falls apart, right? Now you might get awareness generated really great, fantastic, but if you don't put all the pieces, you get terrible repeat purchase because it just doesn't connect all the dots. So I think that some of the things that really are going to be valuable is those strategic frameworks, if you will, that everybody has to wrap their hands around and say, okay, these pieces all knit together. We certainly see a lot of companies having brand frameworks that are partway there, right? That don't include anything about product. We see a lot of companies that don't even have product strategies, right? They haven't even started building that piece yet. So certainly a huge opportunity there. And then, like I was seeing, we got, one of the questions that came in was like, what's causing people or resistance to embracing behavioral methods? I think it's two pieces. Number one is structure, right? Those strategies that have some structure, so people have some way of applying the information. And the second is language. I think they don't, R&D technical teams that are really understanding the product, they talk a very different language than the marketing teams. And those two teams talk a very different language than the senior executives.
Yeah.
Right? So there's, I think the barrier has come in not taking the time to think through strategically, how are we going to knit this all together? And then what is the common language we're going to have within our organization?
I think that's so true. And I think so, we talk a lot these days about customer experience, user experience, anything with an X on the end. And yet very little is talked about how the product experience and the brand experience do or do not align, how expectations that are garnered by the marketing and the brand expectations, if you like, are they actually built, are they actually met by the actual product experience, by the actual packaging experience, by the actual retail experience?
Yeah.
Those are things that we haven't yet really sorted, and it comes down to organizational design, and that's that I think is one of the biggest things that we have to work out going forward in the future.
Yeah. So this, I think this is really important point, Simon. I'd like to elaborate more. I mean, you think about organizational design, you think about, let's think about insights and the type of insights, the professionals that are involved in that area, in insights, to sort of help create this flow, the brand product alignments, the marketing messaging alignments, and even further up, from an innovation perspective, the understanding of where to target, right? And translation of those targets into the product experience itself. So what is needed, what is missing, and what is going to be needed into the future with regard to talent, with regard to people?
So about 10 years ago, a colleague of mine and I wrote a part of a book that was published called The Future, what was it, Leading Edge Marketing Research. And we described, that first part of the book was about what does the insights function of the future look like? And I think what we said then still holds very much today, that there are going to be 3 different types of people that are necessary. One of them, by the way, is not project managers. That is definitively going to become much more automated. The 3 different types are, we're going to need a lot of different types of specialists. You think about, ranging from those who know how to use particular technologies and softwares to those who are expert in social listening, to just name it. We can't grasp it all. We're going to need a lot of specialists. Those specialists are going to be essentially generating and parsing data, enormous amounts of data. We're going to need polymaths, the type of analysts that can look at this data, that can connect the dots, can look at that piece of data that is out of whack, who can construct the stories. And then increasingly, we need consultants who can take that story to senior management and ensure that it is acted upon. And have the guts. These departments are going to have the guts to actually measure the impact, the financial impact that they are responsible for on the corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what, you know, a lot of what we do now is actually training companies in how to do that. But those are the key elements of the future. It's much more about being at the center of the organization strategically, having the story, and not just storytelling, but story impelling, basically ensuring that senior management gets excited about that story and knows what to do with it. That's where we're going to have to go, and I think a lot of us are going in that direction.
Yeah, that's a really, I love this train of thinking, and also from an insights company, like a supplier for corporate groups and so on. What's the future look like there? What is the structures? Where are the needs going to be greatest coming from companies like Insights Now or other companies that are trying to provide services to help corporate functions and companies be better?
Well, if you kind of translate what I said for the corporate functions and look at it as it applies to an agency like Insights Now, you have a certain specialty. You have this innate understanding of moments of emotions and how they build into product choice and how they build into product experience. You have that deep down specialty. And I think most agencies that are going to be successful will have a few of those specialties. They won't be, you know, generalists anymore. Generalists are not going to survive. But then what I think is really key is that you come alongside your clients. You're saying to them this strategically. What does this mean strategically? Let's talk about what it means strategically. How are you going to take this forward? How can we construct the story for you so that you can take it forward? That, you know, the old days of handing over a 50-page PowerPoint deck are over. And I know so many CI function leaders who will be going, thank God for that. You should be coming alongside them and saying, how can we help you improve the impact you have on the business? How can we help you measure the impact you have on the business? How can we measure how we have an impact on your business? That's the way in which I think successful agencies will grow in the future.
Great. So Greg, do you have any further thoughts before we go to our all the people are joining us for some questions? I see some questions that have come in, and while you're wrapping, if people want to add more to the Q&A here, now's the time. I see some more popping in here. So Greg?
Well, I was actually, Simon, I wanted to so you talked about, rise of all of the investment, the billions of dollars that are coming into the technology side. So, I mean, obviously everybody's excited about the AI components here, but what do you in the future? I mean, are we going to see, is it going to move outward like a crazy number of tools and we're going to have to figure out how to do it? Or are you seeing that we're going to start to get more focused in with the types of tools and techniques and technologies that are available? What kind of thoughts do you have on where that part of the industry is moving?
So I think right now it is an explosion, as you said. We did an analysis last year just of the American market for do-it-yourself market research platforms. 17 different types of platform. There are 230 platforms out there to choose from.
Yeah.
If you're a client, you're not going to want to go through 230 platforms.
Right.
In addition to which, now economic conditions have changed, and venture capital is not going to be so free with money. All of which is to say, I think we're going to see a lot of consolidation. We're already seeing a lot of consolidation.
Okay.
I think there's going to be a study of what it means to have zero-party, first-party, third-party data, where they all fit in, how they fuse together, how we do this on a massive scale. I think so. That's another major part of it, of the future. And I think the other major part, and this is a statistic that blows my mind, but 80% of the data in the world is unstructured.
Yeah.
And unstructured data is growing at 3 times the rate of structured data. If we can get a hold of unstructured data and really begin to mine that in a way that is rich, then that is going to be really interesting. And I think a lot of the technology is going to go down that direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Future, a lot of AI is right there.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah.
Well, let's address some of the questions perhaps we have here, and then we can do final wrap-ups at the end. But some really good. The first comes from Karen Lynch. And Karen, welcome. And she was posted this question fairly earlier in our conversation today. And what is the cause of people's resistance embracing behavioral methods?
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned a little bit about the idea that there's no frameworks to apply it to. I think that people also there's a lot of challenge in understanding what are what's the basics that I need, right? So if you go to the behavioral conferences as an example, they get pretty technical pretty quick, and a lot of those are pushing very small influence, like, hey, if I do the technique this way, I get this little tiny bump. If I do it this way, I get this little tiny bump. So I think one of our resistance is the fear that you have to get in, or you have to know the information at a really deep level. I think this is where you come back with frameworks. So to overcome that barrier of the fear of having to know something that's kind of hard to understand, it's having simple structures, simple frameworks, like, so we talk at Insights Now, we have the habit flywheel. We talk about how context drives a person's choices through. Try to keep it really simple. We were even asking ourselves, well, how do we keep that even one level simpler than what it is today? Because I think the easier we make it for people to adopt one step at a time, the faster they're going to get there. The second is, I think you got to have the method connected to a metric. Simon, that's what you were talking about earlier. If you don't get a method connected to a metric, all you're doing is changing somebody's gut. And then it's like, well, did you really make a big difference or not, right? Maybe help me be more confident in my decision. But if there's no way to measure it, you don't really have something that you can consistently stand on, project to project to project, program, launch to launch. You got to have something that you can have some consistency around.
I think you're so right, Greg, and that point about the frameworks and the applicability and the fear of knowing something that's relatively complex. We've seen it time and again in research. I mean, one of the most powerful tools that research has is barely used: semiotics. And semiotics has the potential to be game changing in many areas, but people are really scared of it. They don't understand it because there's no framework, or no framework that a simple framework that they can understand. So I think you're absolutely right. That's where it is. And nice to hear from Karen.
Yeah, yeah. I think frameworks are really key in this world of complexity. They're simplified, it's still into processes or understanding frameworks. Next question, how could AI help the outlier piece of data that points to new questions that need asking? And I think we answered it a little bit, but any further thoughts on that outlier piece of information and how AI could help?
I think the thing that AI does is it absorbs and basically masticates on massive amounts of past data. So if it sees a past example of something like that, it can follow it. It can even potentially work out if Microsoft's engineers are correct and this thing is becoming sentient, which I really hope they're not correct about. But it may start thinking through for itself, well, why is that there and what else can I learn? What it cannot do, I don't think, and this is where sentience maybe is necessary, is it cannot intuit that something's wrong. It can't intuit that that thing that's out of place might actually be important, might actually hold the key to understanding. And I think that's where we do need human intelligence. Will that last forever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And intuiting is really an important quality of being sentient.
and the other part of that, Dave, and this is where I think it's fascinating, is intuition can often be very illogical.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
a good point.
Yep. And also the other piece, if I might add, is the idea of empathy.
Yes.
To have empathy for people, to have empathy for your customers, or whoever you're trying to, so the idea of understanding the tensions that people have takes empathy, and that goes beyond, I think, this idea of taking even unstructured information, and so on. And there was one last question that I wanted to address, and it came up, and I just lost one of my screens.
Oh, no.
So
You want me to get it?
Yeah, if you can get the last one.
So,
just when I was about to say it, it's
sure.
gone.
So, Simon, you were talking about generalists. So the question is,
that's
generalists aren't going to survive. So why is that the case?
Primarily because, at least from what we can see, a lot of corporate consumer information functions feel capable of doing a lot of the standard work that research calls for themselves on DIY platforms that they've been trained to do and quite happy to do. They don't need agencies to do those, whereas in the past they did. What they need agencies to do is to supply deep specialist knowledge and deep specialist service in a consultant fashion, as well as an expert fashion. And it's those that they're going to value most. The survival of those that seem generalist right now, so I can be as bold as to mention, a Kantar or a company like that, is primarily because their specialism is they're global, and because they've actually been buying up various different technologies and specialties themselves. And they get rid of the generic stuff that they used to do in the past.
Hmm. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, I think the generalist that is they're going to survive if they're going to be able to be the person that can help figure out which specialty is most valuable, right? So they're going to be the generalists that'll survive are the ones that help create the decision process and get people to figure out, how do I make those decisions faster, more quickly? Where do I need data to make the decision versus where is it smarter to take the risk and just go? So I think you're right. My intuition is those generalists that survive actually become the pointers too, if you will, the specialty spaces.
Yeah.
20 years ago in Canada, 20, 30 years ago, the Canadian market had a model which was unique. There were a bunch of specialist agencies, and then there were a whole bunch of people who were known to be really great generalist researchers, who companies went to and said, this is what we need. And then they looked around all the agencies that they were you need them. And they were there as kind of I don't know how you call them. They're matchmakers. Yes, exactly. I don't think that model exists anymore, but it used to.
Might be coming back.
Yeah, so there's a lot of big problems in this world. There's a lot of change that's impacting companies. And I think this sort of evolution of the model of the research agency for research functions and how they get more strategic is being driven by the change that we're seeing in the world, whether it's climate change, whether it's economic change, whether it's HR change, and whatever and a lot of these changes are all linked back, I think, to issues such as climate change and big changes that are long term. But nonetheless, there's big challenges out there that companies that are trying to put consumer products in the market to do that and stay in business, stay ahead of the curve. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that this is driving a lot of the change, the need for change at the corporate side, to be ahead of the curve, to be more strategic, be able to take all this information. This is the generalist, thought. It's instead of being a generalist, what is needed is people the processes to integrate and then be able to synthesize all that content, all that unstructured and structured data, so that these big problems of the world, you can forecast several different possible scenarios and then have weak signals that you can monitor along the way to say, this is the likely path. This is the scenario that is likely to play out, so you can pivot more quickly. That is the world, I think, that we're going towards. And I know it's and with all these tools and this change that you're talking about, Simon, and we're seeing it. Greg and I are seeing it every day, so this sort of evolution. So it's exciting times. It's really exciting times. And I like to kind of wrap things up here because we need to move on. And any final points you want to make, Simon or Greg?
Just say, I think you're right. The one final thing I've said forever is that technology is not the driver of change in this industry. It is the client needs that are the drivers of change and the drivers of technology.
Yeah. Greg?
Yeah, well, thank you, Simon, for joining. I always learn so much
Pleasure.
every time I get a chat with
Really.
you. It's fantastic. I love it. Yeah, I think that we need to approach the future with excitement. There's a lot of good foundational pieces that if we can start at the beginning, put them in place, focus on the moments, put a good framework in place. A lot of these pieces that are unique and valuable, like AI elements coming into play, they're going to play good roles for us. We just have to know where to put them into the tech. So take that tech, put it in a good framework, and it's going to net a wonderful wealth of value for us. So I'm excited about that. So
Yeah.
future
Yeah.
looks bright.
Yeah. Really good. Next month, I believe, Greg, you're going to be doing a webinar on fingerprints, correct?
Yeah, talking about sensory brand fingerprinting, correct?
Yeah. So it's this connection between brand and
Yeah,
product,
it's that alignment.
which is so important and really exciting topic. So I can't wait to hear it from you as you lead that conversation. If any of you are on here are going to be at the Institute of Food Technology meeting next week, Greg and I are giving a number of talks. I got two. Greg's got a couple that he's involved in. Reach out to us. We love to connect at that expo, and as well as the technical side of that expo. So that's just next week on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So, okay. So with that, thank you, Simon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Again, learn so
Thank
much
you,
from you
everybody.
every time, have a conversation. And thank you everyone for joining in and your questions as well. If you have any other questions, please fire away, send those to Greg or I, and we'll, or Simon for that matter, and we'll try to get them answered. Okay, bye.